What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. I know the sting of Super Bowl 60 may still be lingering for you. That wound is still fresh, but it's the offseason. It is the team-building portion of the program now, and you know that is when the Next Pats podcast thrives. That's what we will be talking about today, is what is to come this offseason for New England. How can they make this roster that was somehow able to make a run all the way to San Francisco and play in the Super Bowl even better? What does Mike Vrabel need to do? What does Elliott Wolf need to do? What kinds of players will they be looking for? And yes, dear friends, we have a 5-point plan to make sure that the Patriots are better in 2026 and beyond. But first, let's play a little sound from Mike Vrabel. Immediately after the Super Bowl, he was asked if his Super Bowl experience would prove to be a valuable one. I found his answer fascinating. Here it is.
Well, it's only valuable if we understand what it takes and what we're going to need to do to improve. And if we don't do that, then it won't have been very valuable. We had a really, really good year and one that I'm proud of, but in this game, I don't think is a reflection of our year. We lost and we were beat. We were beat, out-coached and outplayed, and give them credit.
All right, let's focus in on that word, improve. How do the Patriots improve this roster? What did they learn about their postseason run? Not even just in the Super Bowl. It had to be that they need more from their front. They need more from their offensive line. They need more from their playmakers. This was an issue. Both of these areas, quite frankly, were issues that we anticipated being much larger issues throughout the course of the 2025 season. And because they got great coaching, they got great quarterback play, and yes, because players, both on the offensive line and in the receiving corps, far exceeded my personal expectations and the expectations of many. They were not the glaring weaknesses we thought they might be coming into the year. However, you do need to upgrade at both spots. That's, to me, what the Patriots had to have learned about themselves. How do you do it, though? Because let's look at that offensive line first. It feels like the two players who had the biggest issues in the biggest game of the season were rookies Will Campbell and Jared Wilson. Makes sense. You're starting two rookies for the first time in Super Bowl history on your offensive line. They're going to have issues, and boy, oh boy, did they. But are you going to move on from them? Mike Vrabel's already said that Will Campbell's the starting left tackle for next year. Jared Wilson, my guess is, will have a starting spot somewhere, or at least he'll be given an opportunity to reclaim a starting spot, whether it's at left guard or center, maybe even right guard. Who knows? So you're going to move on from one of your three veterans, Garrett Bradbury, Mike Onwenu, or Morgan Moses, in order to try to upgrade when you could argue those were the three best players up front for the New England Patriots during this 2025 season, during this magical run? How about your 1,000-yard receiver? You only had one of them, Stephon Diggs. If you're going to upgrade that receiver room, is it going to be by moving on from him, or are you going to move on from Matt Collins, who's still under contract and is a cost-effective and valuable player when he's healthy and available to you? Are you going to move on from a Kayshon Boutte or a Pop Douglas or a Kyle Williams, who are all still on their rookie contracts? There'll be some challenging choices on the table for people like Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf. Vrabel, a couple days after his Super Bowl loss, spoke about towing that line and finding that balance between liking the foundation that you've been able to lay in year one, and boy, oh boy, it's an impressive foundation, but also adding to it. Here's what he had to say on Tuesday.
Talked about a disappointing finish to a phenomenal, exciting, enjoyable year. It's unfortunate. Talked to him about the, foundation I think that we've built, much like a home. You build a home and then run out of things to do, and so you continue to add on to it. You finish the basement, you make additions to it, and we'll try to do that to this football team. I like the foundation of it, and we'll try to improve on it.
In that very same press conference, just moments later, here's what Vrabel said in terms of having to tweak and maybe, yes, pull away from what was a tremendous roster, a good enough roster to get the Patriots all the way to the Super Bowl. He said, quote, "As I was taught, we talk about the business of the NFL. We're looking for the better, younger, cheaper player every day. And the players that we have are trying to not let that happen." That's the dynamic. That's the business of the National Football League. Now, if the Patriots are able to find, whether it's in free agency or in the draft, better, younger, cheaper. Specifically, outside of those three particular adjectives, what kinds of people are they looking for? Well, one of the people in that front office that is going to be making some of these hard choices this offseason, Elliott Wolf, had this to say when I spoke to him at opening night, and we discussed how he was able to add, and they were able to add as an organization, so many people who were able to contribute right away in year one. Think about the number of free agent hits. Think about the number of rookie draft picks who played hundreds and hundreds of snaps for the New England Patriots. This answer, though it came before the Super Bowl, this answer, friends, still applies to what we're about to witness this coming offseason and the types of humans that the Patriots want to bring to Foxborough. Here's Elliott Wolf.
Yeah, I mean, I think we first of all identified the right kind of people, and once we did that, it was obviously you have to be able to play as well. But it was just a nice meshing of those two things that we were able to get in, and they all bought into Coach Vrabel's culture, and I think that's another thing that's kind of underrated to see like everyone on our team is playing for the guy next to him, and I think that's pretty unique. So we're excited about that.
Sorry, when you talk about the kind of person, what was it that you guys were looking for? Was there one overarching trait that a lot of these guys share?
Not really. I mean, it was, obviously toughness and humility and wanting to do what's best for the team. Like all the general things that you say. I don't think there was one thing, but we didn't want to bring any in here or guys that, weren't going to be about the team. And I think we were able to accomplish that.
Pretty short and to the point there from Elliott Wolf. A-holes need not apply. You also have to be smart, especially offensively, if you're going to join the Patriots and contribute right away. Think about that Josh McDaniels offense. Think about Drake May and the leaps and bounds he was able to make in year two because of what he has between his ears. This offense is only going to get more involved with each passing year. And so if you want to bring people in and bring people in right away who are going to play real roles, you've got to be able to think your way through the game. I asked Josh McDaniels about the number of different players, whether it was Morgan Moses or Garrett Bradbury or Stephon Diggs, or the rookies that they had contribute on that side of the ball, if there was a common trait shared between them, and he talked about their brains. Here's Josh McDaniels.
I think we have a strong aptitude to be able to learn quick. I really do. And that comes from the guys we brought in, and Elliott and Vrabes and the guys that made those decisions about putting the guys together. It's the right blend. And I think, how are we going to teach the quarterback? And if you're going to teach the quarterback at a certain level, then you want to try to surround him with people that fit that, And so doing the work that they did on those guys, and some of us had some experience with some of them, with Mac and those guys, but they did a lot of work on Travion and did a lot of work on Diggsy and did a lot of work, and there's some guys that, when we brought them in here, Kyle Williams, they're just good fits because they can learn and think, and they're a good match for the QB. And if they're not a good match for the quarterback, then it doesn't really work. So those guys deserve all the credit for putting this group together, and it's been an incredible fun year.
So your capacity to learn matters. Let's keep that in mind as we go through free agency and the draft, and we're thinking about the types of players that the Patriots might want to bring in, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. But do you push yourself to learn? That's an entirely different trait, and it's one that also matters to the Patriots. Remember, they did not want to fly blind last offseason when they brought in free agents. The number of players who had either had experience with Vrabel specifically or somebody else on his staff, that was critically important to them because they had a better sense of the type of person they were bringing into their building. So whether it's Harold Landry or Robert Spillane or Jack Gibbons, who had experience with Vrabel, or Morgan Moses and Stephon Diggs, who had played for teams that employed Todd Downing, or Kayvon Chason, who had been with Doug Marrone when he was head coach in Jacksonville. These types of insights that they were able to get from individuals already on Vrabel's staff allowed them to bring in the right kind of people and have the success that they were able to have almost right away. What else matters to Mike Vrabel? You talk about the ability to learn, pushing yourself to learn, being a good teammate, being selfless and fitting into the culture that way. What's your visual brand? Because this is something that will matter to the Patriots too. And when I say visual brand, I mean when they watch you on tape, will it jump off the screen that you finish, that you push the pile if you're an offensive lineman, that you fly to the football if you're a defensive player? those culture traits matter to them, and those can show up on your tape. Those can show up on the field. Are you a good teammate? Are you a hard worker? Are you selfless? They should be able to see that. That should be part of your visual brand. So yes, all the stuff in the locker room, off the field, what kind of human being are you? That stuff matters. But why does it matter? Well, ultimately, because it's going to help the product on the field be even better than it would be otherwise. So your visual brand is going to matter to Mike Vrabel as well as he's dissecting the tape this offseason. Another thing for us to keep in mind as we're thinking about free agents the Patriots could bring in, as we're thinking about draft picks they could be making. Are you going to protect the team, and can they see that? Can the Patriots higher-ups see that on your film? And then last but not least, what kind of sense of humor do you have? Can you laugh at yourself? Can you take a joke? Because if you can't, you might not be a fit for Mike Vrabel's program. It's a long season. And if you're the kind of person that makes it difficult for others to come to work every day, you're probably not the kind of person that they want in New England. So might not be at the top of the list in terms of selflessness and being a good teammate. Might not be at the top of the list in terms of what you're bringing on tape and your visual brand. But this thing matters too. Remember, they're trying to have a good time in there. It's okay for them to have a good time. Remember the Will Campbell weekend updates. Remember the Friday competitions between assistant coaches out on the practice field. Yes, they work, and yes, they take their job seriously. But again, it's a long season, and nobody knows it better than Mike Vrabel in terms of what that experience is like as a player and now as a coach. And you got to be able to fit into the room. And you got to be able to fit in with this coach who's going to poke fun at you no matter who you are. That's just sort of his way of interacting with other human beings. That's his love language. And so can you hang with that? Because if you can't, that's fine. New England, probably just not the place for you. All right, much more ahead on this edition of Next Pats. We're going to talk our 5-point plan for the Patriots offseason. We're also taking some of your mail. It's all coming up next on Next Pats. Welcome back to Next Pats. Let's launch right into our Who's Next segment. And this is where we're going to get into our 5-point plan for the Patriots offseason. And point number 1, don't get married to key contributors from your Super Bowl run in 2025. I understand there are going to be emotional ties to a lot of these players. There's some big names that we're about to mention here, but these are the types of names that I think are worthy of some hard conversations if you want to make the cold, calculating decisions that you have to as part of the NFL business that every team has to make if they're making the right decisions for their long-term futures. And the name we're going to start with is Stefon Diggs. Ended up averaging about 55 yards per game for you, had a 1,000-yard season. Tremendous year. Far exceeded my expectations, but I think some of his limitations also showed up in the postseason. He has $1.7 million guaranteed on his deal for 2026. Not a huge number. But if you get to the regular season, that $20.6 million base salary becomes guaranteed, and actually $6 million of that will be guaranteed on March 13th. So that's the key date. If he gets his $6 million on March 13th, he's going to be with this team. If he doesn't, you're going to be looking for wide receivers, whether it's in free agency or in the draft, to help fill the gap. Now, you could save almost $17 million on the cap. We don't really talk a ton about the cap here because it is, at the end of the day, funny money. You can finagle that thing however you need to, but those would be your savings. You would have $9.7 million in dead money if you end up parting with Stefon Diggs. So, something to consider if you don't view his role as one that is going to be massive for you at 33 years old as a slot receiver who isn't going to give you a ton in the run game. But boy, he was so competitive. He gave that locker room so much. He was praised all year long by the quarterback himself. And so maybe Drake May's at the point in his career where he looks at a player like Stefon Diggs and says, hey, we got to make sure that we bring that guy back. And they heed his advice. Let's see. Again, mid-March, key for Stefon Diggs in his future with the New England Patriots. How about Micah Onwenu? No money guaranteed on his deal for 2026. He's due to have a $16 million base salary. If you were to release him, it would save you $17.5 million on the cap. You'd have $7.5 million dead money on your cap. This is a player who's been a very solid player for you, but do they think they can replace him and get similar value for much less money? That would be the question for me. He's been a very good guard for an extended period of time here, but let's keep an eye on that. They did make sure to extend Ben Brown this past season, mid-season, and so if they view a larger role for him, and maybe they signed him to be that super sub on the interior, maybe, but when given opportunities to start, Ben Brown's been fine. Are they looking to maybe move on from one of those interior players to allow Ben Brown to ascend into a different role? Interesting one to keep an eye on. A couple more veterans on the offensive line worth talking about here. Morgan Moses, I wouldn't anticipate the Patriots moving on from necessarily, but played through injury all year. He will be going into his 35-year-old season, so never say never, but he's guaranteed $4.5 million for next year. He has a $6.5 million base salary. If you were to release him, it only saves you $3.1 million on the cap. You'd end up with $7.3 in dead money. To me, feels like the kind of guy you would want to keep around. Doesn't mean you don't add a tackle in some way, shape, or form to feel like you have the next guy ready to go. But Moses, to me, feels like he could be back next year. How about Garrett Bradbury? No guaranteed money on his deal for next year, due to have a $3.7 million base salary. Cutting him would end up saving you about $6 million on the cap. And so again, to me, what do you have coming after him at center? I thought he had a really good year. There are very few games, if any, this year where you looked at Garrett Bradbury as a problem. And in terms of his locker room fit and how he impacted younger players on that offensive line, I put Morgan Moses into that category as well. I thought he was plus. So what are you valuing? How are you envisioning how you want to spend your money? These are things that will end up mattering. And then there's one more name here, and this is a difficult situation because both he and Diggs are due to be arraigned in court locally here. Diggs this month, Barmore next month, but that is the next name here on the list in terms of players. Do you want to make sure that you are married to these guys long term? I think it's worth bringing up because, like Diggs, he has a mid-March payday on the schedule. $10 million guaranteed to Christian Barmore if he's still on the roster on March 13th. He has a $12 million base salary, for next year. Only $2 million right now is guaranteed for next year. You don't save a ton in terms of releasing him, but how do you view the long-term fit, especially when you have a very highly paid player in Milton Williams playing alongside him in the trenches? Now, those players, I thought, complemented each other very nicely, especially in the postseason. But these are sometimes the hard decisions you have to make because you're also going to have to make some really smart investments, and that gets to point 2 in our 5-point plan. I think an easy decision would be to extend Christian Gonzalez and give him the Sauce Gardner contract and don't think about it for the next 5 years. He's that kind of player. I think he proved it in the Super Bowl. You want to play man, you want to play zone. He is one of the best corners in football, and you just don't let players like that walk out the door. I know there's some question in terms of scheme fit. The Patriots didn't play a ton of man, and Christian Gonzalez is a man corner. He's just a good corner, zone or man. And it's still a premium position in this league. Quarterback, cornerback, left tackle. I would put receiver in there. Defensive interior players, I think, are becoming more and more valuable by the day, but corners in that group. And so you got to pay Christian Gonzalez. Are you also going to pay Kayvon Chason due to be a free agent? Christian Gonzalez is not a free agent, but this is the first time he's eligible to make to be extended, And so this would be the time because you don't want to wait it out. You're going to end up costing yourself money down the line if you don't do it as early as possible. So get Gonzalez extended. If you want to bring back Kayvon Chason, if you want to bring back Kairos Tonga, if you want to bring back Jalen Hawkins, these are really important players for that Patriots defense. They're all due to be free agents there. So again, do you have to make a hard decision on one of those other names when we're talking about don't get married to the players that got you to the Super Bowl? Do you have to make a hard decision on one of them in order to bring back some of these players that are due to hit the market? Point number 3, upgrade your weapons for Drake May. And I'm starting with one name in particular, Alec Pierce. One of the most efficient deep threats in football. Pair him with a young quarterback who loves to throw the football down the field. He would be your receiver for the foreseeable future. Now, how would that work with the other players you have? I think you'd make Mac Hollins one of these players who can play along the interior. We've seen him take almost tight end types of alignments at times. He is such a mismatch in terms of what he can do blocking in the run game against corners. If you want to match him with a bigger player, he can take him down the field and make plays over the middle. Matt Collins is a really valuable player for them in terms of the chess game and the X's and the O's. You put Alec Pierce on the outside and you allow him to be that true deep threat down the field. You still have, again, Kayshon Boutte, who can do some of those same types of things, although he's typically an X, and so maybe this would mean less work for him if they were to sign Alec Pierce. Kyle Williams, similar deal, plays a lot of X when he is on the field, and so you have to figure out a way to use him. But between Hollins, Pierce, Boutte, Douglas, Williams, that to me is a group that has speed and some explosive playmaking ability that pairs nicely with your explosive playmaking quarterback. And then you got to protect the franchise in free agency. That's point number 4. What is your run scheme? That to me is a question that you have to figure out first if you're thinking about adding players along the offensive line. Because if you want to be more of a zone run scheme, and Mike Vrabel has shown in the past some preference to having that type of offense, and the Patriots showed this year that they have a willingness and an affinity for booting out Drake May. Those boots are less effective if you never run the wide zone run play. And the Patriots really were not a wide zone running team, in part because of what they had on their offensive line. With guys like Mike Owenu, it's not going to make all the sense in the world to have him hauling ass to the sideline as fast as humanly possible when he would much rather go downhill and north-south and grind out yards in the run game that way. Do you want to get more athletic on your offensive line? And that, to me, would go a long way. Finding out that question and finding out what you want to do philosophically, offensively. If you want to boot your quarterback more, do you want to stretch run more? That's going to impact the types of players you're looking for on the offensive line. Then you have to figure out, what is Jared Wilson? Is he a guard? Is he a center? Because that would impact the kinds of players that you'd be looking for in free agency. And then, based on how you answer those questions, there are players to pay at those positions on the interior. If you have Will Campbell at one tackle and you have Morgan Moses at least to start at the other tackle, if you want to look at Isaac Suamalo or Zion Johnson of Boston College, he's a free agent, former first-round pick. He could probably play in either scheme. David Edwards from Buffalo is another interior lineman who's available, be playing a guard for you. Tyler Linderbaum, this is going to be one of the more expensive free agents on the market, but if you're looking for a center specifically, if you don't, for whatever reason, want to play Jarrett Wilson at center, you want to keep him at guard, do you want to go crazy and spend a boatload of money on Tyler Linderbaum, or Connor McGovern? That would be the less expensive option from Buffalo. There are some names out there, veteran names that would be ready to protect Drake May right away, and they might fit, depending on who you choose, they might fit whatever scheme it is that you want to run next year better than the guys that you have on the roster at the moment. We made it to point number 5, and here it is. Trade that 31st overall pick for Max Crosby. And I'm laughing as I say it because I don't know if they'll ever do it. He's such a talented player, and boy, it would make your defensive front that much more dangerous if you were to add him. And thinking about the certainty that he gives you as a player and what he would give you in terms of production versus what you might or might not get from that 31st pick. We do so much draft talk here. We love talking draft. Acquiring draft picks, generally speaking, the smart way to go. But when you talk as much draft as we do, you also know there is a high likelihood that the 31st overall pick is not going to end up working out. That's just the way it goes. You're not picking at 4 overall or 3 overall anymore. You're all the way down at the bottom of the first round. And yes, you should be able to get a good player there, a productive player, contributing player for you. It just doesn't always work out that way. And so if that's the flip, if it's 31 overall and a little more, 31 overall and a player for Max Crosby, if that's all it requires, go ahead and do that. The Patriots don't want to do that because they're saving money for the Christian Gonzalez signing. Maybe they're looking down the road at an extension for Drake May after next season. It could be $70 million a year. Pick a number. And maybe you decide not to pay Max Crosby, end up taking a player with that pick. If that's the case, go ahead and get a right tackle. How about Blake Miller from Clemson? This is a player we haven't yet mentioned on this podcast this year. We talked a ton of college prospects throughout the course of the year here on Next Patch. You can go back and you can sort through them all and find out how we feel about a number of different players in a number of different positions. Blake Miller set the record for snaps played offensively at Clemson during his career there. 54 starts, played through injury, tough, athletic, and again, right tackle. You don't have to talk about that flip from the left side to the right side. One of the better right tackles in this year's draft. Could be a first-round pick. Maybe he's more of a day 2 guy, but at 31 overall, if you feel like you want to get that young player as the next in line to take over for Morgan Moses whenever that has to happen, Blake Miller feels like a really good fit for this Patriots program and what they need on the field for the foreseeable future. All right, let's get to some of your mail really quickly now. We have a question here from the 617 Hub. Kyle Pitts a fit? Great question, and I love your brevity. Kyle Pitts, free agent tight end from the Atlanta Falcons. If I had to pick a yes or no here, 617, I'm going to go with no for a couple different reasons. Number one, he ain't going to be much of a blocker for you. And in this Josh McDaniels offense, we know how much he values guys that can contribute in the running game and be able to be used as sort of a chess piece. And yes, you could do that with Kyle Pitts because he's essentially a receiver. And so if he can get in the way as a blocker, great. But he is primarily a receiver. I would also say this. Remember, he played for Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith, good buddy of Mike Vrabel's. Arthur Smith coached under Mike Vrabel in Tennessee. That relationship never seemed to get off the ground while Arthur Smith was there. He never really figured out how to use Kyle Pitts in such a way that it maximized his potential as an athlete, as a pass catcher. There just wasn't a whole lot in the way of production there. So I'm going to lean no for now, but he is a fascinating player. And boy, if they were able to acquire him, it's not a bad way to get a little bit more explosive. I just am not sure if I see the fit in New England. How about David Njoku, though? Somebody that Mike Vrabel would have known from his year in Cleveland in 2024. Another tight end who looks like he's going to be available. Next question. This one is from Castle Long. Says, what lineman might be available at 31? Well, we just talked about Blake Miller, and I know you're talking draft, and I love it. And I'll give you a few more names here. And a couple of these are names that we've already mentioned on the Next Pats podcast. How about Max Ihanachor from Arizona State? Another right tackle. Great feet, great size, had an excellent Senior Bowl. That's a guy that we're going to be talking about a lot this offseason because where he might go in the draft, what the Patriots might need, those two things seem to match up pretty well. How about Monroe Freeling from Georgia, the tackle there? It's a name that Dane Brugler, I know, likes for the New England Patriots. Caleb Lomu, our friend Field Yates from ESPN, has Caleb Lomu. This is the left tackle at Utah. First-round pick. Spencer Fano, his teammate, also looking like a first-round pick, but Field Yates stuck the Patriots with Caleb Lomu in his most recent mock draft, so that's a name to keep in mind. Then how about Jennings Dunker from Iowa? This might be more of a guard if you want somebody to play on the interior. He played right tackle for the Hawkeyes, but boy, strong, tough, and an unbelievable fiery red mullet. This guy is a character. Feels like he might fit one of those qualities we were talking about earlier in the show. Can you take a joke? Can you poke fun at yourself? I don't know if I would be making a joke at Jennings Dunker's expense, but somebody in that locker room probably would try, and it feels like he might be able to roll with it. Then Caleb Tiernan. Played tackle at Northwestern. Maybe he's a guard, maybe he's a tackle, but that's a name that we've mentioned here on Next Pats as well. Very smart, very tough, and somebody who I could see fitting in to Mike Vrabel's program. Great questions, as always. All right, that's it for this edition of Next Pats. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. What a year it was. What fun it was to track this team, to report on this team all the way through its run to the Super Bowl. But now is the time. Now is the time for Next Pats to thrive. It is the offseason, and we can't wait to dig into it all with you for weeks on end. We will talk to you very, very soon, right back here on Next Pats.